We all know that our society is divided into rich and poor, and there are far fewer rich people than poor people, and at the same time, the poor obey the rich and even fear them. Rich and poor people live different lives. Some eat like crazy and then go crazy from fat, while others work like crazy all day long, providing the rich with a sweet life, and themselves with miserable crumbs, so as not to die of hunger. It is clear that the interests of both are different, or rather, in some positions, they fundamentally contradict each other. For some, it is important to exploit the poor as effectively as possible in order to increase their wealth, but others, that is, the poor, want to get rid of this exploitation and improve their lives. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote about this in his book, The Prince. You can read it to expand your knowledge of this world. I am going to tell you about some other things related to rich and poor people, so that you would be calmer and more understanding about this seemingly unfair, but at the same time very interesting life. Well, and at the same time I want you to understand how you can change your life in general, towards its improvement, if you, of course, have a need for it. Most of us do not really like our life. Someone is completely fed up with it, because of the abundance of various problems in it. Someone is trying to find some meaning in their life. For someone, life is nothing more than an opportunity to get extra pleasure, by any available means, well, and someone dreams of great accomplishments, great achievements, great feats. But all this greatness lives mainly in the dreams of man, and real life, meanwhile, gives off grayness and insipidity. Well, if you think about it, then we all lack something for complete satisfaction. I wonder what? Today, no matter what you touch, everything comes down to money. It is needed for this and that. Without it you can hardly go anywhere, and if you are poor, then all you think about is money all day long, and how not to die of hunger. Well, what can I say? We need to develop a sober, healthy, promising, and maximally realistic position in life, which would allow each of us to gain confidence in ourselves and in the future. It is not difficult to develop such a position, friends, believe me. You just need to reboot your brain and look at the world through the eyes of a creator who will create, first of all, his own destiny. What do we need to change in our brains so that, regardless of whether we are rich or poor, we can look at the world with a more encouraging and exciting view of our imagination, after which a shiver runs down our spine, from interest in finding out how everything will work out for us in the future? First of all, friends, do not attach much importance to your current position in this life. We came to this world to play a game called life, and no one really promised or guaranteed us that this very life would be chocolate. We were given the opportunity to breathe air, move our arms and legs, and occasionally move our brains, and you and I need to skillfully wield this in order to do something special in our lives, so as not to waste it in vain. Therefore, if, let's say, you are poor, or simply not rich, then there is nothing terrible about it. All this is nonsense. You will still have a lot of opportunities in life to change everything. Even your reading of this article is already a great action on your part. You are trying to understand something, you want to figure something out. And this is really cool, friends, really cool, I'm serious. Even God bless her that this is my article. You take some book, read it, think about it. This will also be a great event in your life. And there is no need to cry, cursing everything and everyone, because you are not the only one who has suffered in this life. You are not the only one who is missing something, and you are not the only one who is not satisfied with something. Each of us drags his own cross, which pulls him to the ground. Therefore, do not worry about what is and is not in your life now. Be grateful to fate for everything you have, and think better about what you will have in the future, what good you can still do for yourself, and preferably for others. Secondly, do not be too critical of what is happening and what each of us observes with our own eyes in this world. Do not judge anything, because everything that happens in this world has its own necessity and benefit. You may think that the same problems in the economy, because of which you, in turn, experience problems with money, are someone's fucking screw up, for which they should be hung by one place. And you know what, you will be right in reasoning in this way, but if we are all hung by this very place, for all our screw-ups, then we will all be left without these places. Because we are all not without sin. But we do not need this, you understand, we need to do our own things, and not watch other people's affairs, no matter how disgusting they are, because no one will adapt to you and me, only we can really change something for ourselves for the better. And in general, there have always been so many problems with people that I personally think it is stupid and pointless to single out any one problem, any one single scoundrel, or several scoundrels who harm everyone with their existence. Man himself is a big problem for this world and this planet. We, people, sometimes start senseless wars, sometimes manage to cause famine in different countries with our developed technologies, sometimes create crises to moderate our own appetites, sometimes spread all sorts of viruses around the planet in order to heroically fight them later. In short, we have plenty of screw-ups, and what do we want from a person, from people, perfection or something? Yes, there are bad people in this world, very bad people who poison our lives, but these people don't give a damn about our problems and especially about our opinion of them. Everyone does what they have to, someone rakes in money, leaving others without a piece of bread on the table, and someone plays the saint, not having the opportunity to do the same. In short, both you and I know what kind of shit is going on in our lives, who is to blame for all our troubles, and what we need to do to make this life better. But you know what, let's leave all this intellectual wealth in our heads for now, and try to adjust to what you and I have at the moment. That is, to this imperfect, unfair, ugly world, created for someone else, but not for you and me. You and I can benefit from everything in this world, even from the most unfavorable situations for us. Let's take, for example, rich people who, from the outside, seem to have settled down quite well in this life, and they live, in fact, at the expense of exploiting poor and illiterate people in various ways. Well, is it really bad that they exist, these rich people? Well, think for yourself, how terrible this life would be if only the poor lived in it, and then we would completely despair and lose faith that someone from the human race can live a rich life. But as it is, at least some of our representatives, at the expense of all of us, manage to live well, and even very well. We look at these rich people, wallowing in luxury, and think, people live, damn them. Maybe we can live like that, too, huh? If we just hustle a little, do something somewhere, come up with something, somehow get out of an uncomfortable situation for us, look, our life will improve, and we will live well, we will get rich. There are examples of successful people, there is someone to look up to, that's what's important. And somehow we won't want to blame someone for the fact that he has money, and we don't. After all, if you, dear readers, bite off your piece of the pie, you will definitely look at life with different eyes, I guarantee you that. Life will seem more beautiful and attractive to you if you join the club of rich and successful people. Here I am, a simple person, without any royal blood, without access to quality education, without a normal environment from which you can learn something useful. I was able to acquire more or less decent money, so not everything is as bad and unfair in this world as some of us think. But there are other examples, and there are many of them, when completely ordinary people succeeded in this world. So when there are rich people to follow, it's good, at least you and I will know in this case that such an imperfect creature as a person, who thinks he is God knows what, can be rich. And this instills hope for a better life in all of us. We are all made of the same flesh and blood, damn it, and everything that one person managed to do, another can repeat. As for poverty, there is a lot of useful things in it too. Judge for yourself, what else can make a lazy Vanka get off his ass and start doing something, if not wild poverty, in which it is simply impossible to remain calm and enjoy life. Not everyone is motivated by their desires to have the most good, someone needs to be shown something very bad, some hopeless poverty, so that he really becomes a person, an active person, and not a plant. A special instinct must be activated in this case, and it is not greed, but fear. A person needs to somehow preserve himself and reproduce, he needs to fight for his life, so nature pushes his lazy and miserable little body to great deeds, say, to go and get a job, for starters, at least as a loader. Well, for those whose ambitions of Alexander the Great prevail over all other ambitions that are limited by instinctive needs, poverty is a bone in the throat. A great and all-powerful personality on a horse and without pants, you must admit, does not look good. In general, you understand that if we all had everything in chocolate, people would still be playing tambourines and dancing around the fire, and not studying computers and conquering space. As our satirical writer Mikhail Zadornov says, when your life is a continuous bounty, why do you need to develop? There is no need for this, because everything is fine with you anyway. So poverty is useful, within reasonable limits, as a cure for the degradation of humanity, it is useful. Thirdly, when discussing the topic of the poor and the rich or the rich and the poor, as you prefer, we need to understand the importance of the diversity that exists in our world. This diversity is a must. It is impossible for all people to be only rich or only poor, because in that case, life will become uninteresting, it will lose all meaning and turn into a rotten swamp in which there will be no progress, no development. Thank God, nature has foreseen this and excluded the possibility of a monotonous, overly easy and very boring life in which all people will be the same and equal. That is why we are so different and our lives are also different. In our time, if we look around us, we will definitely see people who have succeeded in something better than us. They have more of something than we do, for example, money. In some matters they are significantly superior to us, and this does not give us peace. We want to beat these people, we want to get ahead of them, or in any case, we want to live no worse than them. Isn't that so? Envy, my friends, is also a very strong instinct that does not allow us to calmly observe the success of other people and forces us to strive for success ourselves. Well, again, showing myself, I will say that I cannot imagine how my life would have turned out if I had not observed and experienced in childhood all those delights that are characteristic of a poor life. You know, I do not want to replay this time and refuse the memories of this precious experience. This is my heritage, this is my value. I will even say this, poverty is cool. It is cool to get out of it, because it is so special, so unique, so emotional, so strong that you need to really strain yourself to get out of this poverty. Having been in poverty, having lived through it, you still have to go through a baptism of fire, after which you will no longer be afraid of anything in this life, except perhaps death. When you know what it is like to have nothing to eat, to be humiliated for your beggarly appearance, but you don't lose heart and look boldly into the future, then you, like a battery, are charged with energy, which will then give you strength for a long time in the struggle for a better life. Just look, friends, how diverse and interesting our life is. There are poor and rich people in it, and once upon a time the so-called middle class was invented to instill hope in poor people for a better life. In other words, you can try everything in this life, both honey and shit, forgive me for such a comparison. And then, who makes the poor poor? Isn't it the poor themselves? Isn't it they themselves who want to live a life in which they only think about survival all day long? Why, tell me, while messing around in shit, when there is no money even for the most necessary things, give birth to 3 to 5, and earlier even more children, or as some people say, lay larvae, which no one will care about later. Is it really so cool to breed poverty? Or is it just that animal instincts turn off people's brains? Well, you have to be able to restrain yourself, you have to be responsible for your desire to copulate, so as not to torment human beings with your indifference to them. Damn poverty, like a plague, spreads very quickly. You only have to bring two stupid creatures of different sexes together. And why, one wonders, then blame rich people for exploiting gray, downtrodden, embittered creatures hated by their own parents, who sometimes live worse than animals? And what else can you do with them? Some of them, of these creatures, of course, will get ahead in life and become a normal person, but many live a terrible life, a miserable life, from which they do not receive any pleasure. Moreover, after themselves they also leave, for the most part, obvious losers, whom they get by accident, for example, when drunk, or for the sake of achieving some of their base goals. For example, some low-ranking females dream of getting pregnant by some moneybags, in order to parasitize on him later. And they don't care about the child, he is just a means for such females to achieve their parasitic goal. So, the question arises, why set up children like that? Why breed losers doomed to a life of poverty? Are we even people, or who? Poverty is, of course, a natural phenomenon in our lives. It has always been and will always be. And, as we have found out above, it is even useful for us. But poverty can be different, it can be wild, when it is simply impossible to live, when, as they say, you are rotting alive, or it can be moderate, in which you can live and there is a chance to succeed in life. And nevertheless, I think it is stupid to deliberately breed poverty. Even animals do not breed in unfavorable conditions, but people, reasonable creatures, do breed. Yes, we can adapt to the conditions in which we live, we can benefit from our position in life. However, I think it is much smarter not to do what makes our lives worse. However, some people have no idea what it means to be poor, but at the same time, they consider themselves poor. When a person cannot afford to move from a small apartment to a large one, buy a new car, a new cell phone, or go on vacation in the summer for financial reasons, then this, my friends, is not poverty. Just as you can't say that a person is starving if all he eats is some bread with barley, and he eats it once a day. This is not hunger, these are trifles. In other words, you don't need to exaggerate the problems in your life, and what can be called poverty is not always so. Often we can talk about moderate poverty, which, of course, is also not a gift and causes us a lot of trouble, but people do not die or suffer from it. We do not need a heavenly life, we will go crazy from it, but we should not create hell with our own hands either, throwing children left and right. To some extent, most of us are poor, because we are forced to work all day long to provide ourselves with money, and many of our things were bought by us on credit. This is not an indicator of wealth, it is an indicator of poverty. But such poverty is bearable, it educates us, and does not kill us, so we should not be afraid of it, we can and some of us even need to live with it. But wild poverty, or hopeless destitution, to be more precise, really turns our life into hell, which, as was said above, is to some extent useful for us, because it motivates us to an active life, but in most cases, such hell kills the person in a person. You need to have great strength of spirit and willpower to withstand all the horror that poor people have to endure. And not all of them, alas, manage to do this, not everyone manages to get ahead in life, many break. We know how poor people live in poor countries, where the crime rate is always very high, we know what their children become and what fate awaits most of them, so there can be no two opinions here. Poor people have very little chance of getting out of poverty and succeeding in life. But they have plenty of chances to die like a dog, but I don't think that anyone in their right mind dreams of this. Well, the more reasons a person will have to think about himself and his life. Manna from heaven does not fall on our heads, we must improve our lives ourselves. No matter how terrible the life of a poor and especially a destitute person is, he always has the opportunity to improve it and get ahead in life. It's just that some people have more of these opportunities, some have fewer, and some have very, very few, but they still exist. But one thing is for sure, no one except you will take care of you. Rich people, by the way, understand life exactly like this. They know that they live in a world where no one needs them except themselves, where their success or failure depends on themselves, and where a person either acts as a resource or as a manager of this resource. And all these fairy tales about God, the state, or just good people, taking care of someone out of the kindness of their hearts and making someone else's life better, are intended for illiterate poor people who readily believe in such fairy tales. And what else can they do? They themselves can't do anything. In reality, no one helps anyone, well, maybe a little bit. But for this little bit, stupid people are mercilessly exploited, squeezing all the life juices out of them and turning their life into an endless struggle for existence, when even the most minimal needs are met with great difficulty. Well, if there was no use for a person, like a slave, why the hell would he be needed in this world? Judge for yourself. A person is such a gluttonous species that he can destroy everything around him, including himself. People are worse than locusts, they parasitize on everything, and unlike the same locusts, people are capable of eating many times more than they actually need. So try feeding this aggressive species of parasites, which, among other things, also reproduces very intensively, leaving, as has already been said above, its larvae after each act of copulation. Today, however, some people, in some countries, have become a little smarter and have begun to protect themselves more often while satisfying their animal needs. Perhaps, in any case, I hope so, that soon even more people will become smarter and then there will be much less poverty in this world, and our life as a result will become much better. The point is that the spread of poverty on the planet is directly related to its overpopulation, which is completely obvious even to the most primitive mind, because the more people, the less oxygen, and vice versa. So it turns out that by multiplying in large numbers, our gluttonous species itself worsens the quality of its life. And if we add to this the low level of education, which the average person can only get by with highly specialized knowledge of something that he must learn to do in order to serve society, then it turns out that we live like cockroaches, eat whatever we can, shit everywhere and multiply mindlessly. That is, we translate good into shit, forgive me for such a vile comparison, but there is no other way to say it. And then we wonder where so many poor people have come from and why so many people die of hunger every year, as if everything happens by itself. In a large family, children always live worse than in families with 1 or 2 children at most, and we can see all this ourselves, in real, not fictitious examples. Therefore, in order not to spread poverty across the planet like a plague, we need to approach the process of childbirth more responsibly. I have to repeat this again, because it is important. Rich people do not reproduce like rabbits, unlike the poor, that is why they live richly. The most important thing that a normal human child should receive is a quality education. A quality education, not the brainwashing that each of us went through in high school. A quality education prepares a person for life, it teaches him to do work that is beneficial to him, not to society. And it should be like that, starting from preschool education and ending with education in higher educational institutions. At the end, we should have a normal person who understands how the world works and how to live in it, and not a mechanism designed to perform some specific task. Or rather, a mechanism, that is, a good specialist in some field, must be, this is good, this is right, but this is not enough. You also need to be able to understand life in order to be able to live, and not exist, toiling for pennies, having a higher education and a couple of dusty diplomas behind you. Yes, friends, you need to pay good money for a good education, and for this, you need to have it. And if you don't have this money, then you shouldn't have a lot of children, condemning them to a miserable existence, for which they are unlikely to be grateful to you. This is my opinion, friends, you may disagree with it. A good education will not make all people rich, this is natural, because the rich are where the poor are. But it will significantly reduce the gap between the rich and the poor and make our life more fair. After all, the poor and the rich are the same people, but with different quality of thinking. And all this nonsense about luck, fortune, lucky stars, and similar things, with which stupid and poor people console themselves, justifying their poverty and the wealth of others, all these are fairy tales that have nothing to do with reality. In reality, more developed creatures exploit less developed ones, and the more successfully they do it, the richer they live. Of course, the rich and the poor can change places, theoretically, but in practice this happens quite rarely, for the simple reason that the rich do not want to voluntarily give up their benefits, and the poor cannot force themselves to fight for these benefits. And many of them are not smart enough to displace rich people from their comfortable places. You, dear readers, I hope, will look at the issue of wealth and poverty philosophically, and regardless of what kind of life you are currently living, you will strive to improve it at all costs. Maybe this life is really unfair, and the world is imperfect, but by God, living and fighting for a place in the sun is very interesting. Rich and poor people will never live in peace and harmony with each other, because their lives are too different, they themselves are too different, and their goals are also different, they have everything in general. They will never understand each other, because the rich live at the expense of the poor, so what kind of understanding can there be here? And if this is so, then there is no point in hoping for some ephemeral peace throughout the world, it will never come. Go to a better life, do not wait for it to come to you, because it will never come to you. What is happening in your life today is not important, what is important is what you will do, and will do for your tomorrow. While you are alive, everything in your life, including your life itself, can change at any moment. And whether your life will change for the better or for the worse depends on you.